understood what Brown v. Board of Education meant. I understood the history that he made by being on the Supreme Court. And see, a lot of times we talk about being that black on the bench, being that black state attorney, being the little pepper flake. But if you aren't bringing the black experience to the stage, what will it be? You're going to arrive into the same thing that somebody else has done because you haven't expanded your commitment to the diverse experience that you've had and letting others get exposure. What good is your presence there other than just a little badge on you, right? This is about purpose and this is about vision. So for me, looking at Thurgood Marshall means something. When you look at the history that he made, when you listen to the things that he said and the positions that he took, he brought his experience to that bench. He brought it and he made certain that people would be accountable for the truth. And that is what we have to do when we make our mark as the black person who did that, as the only African American. See, when I think about the NAACP, I think about that true diversity. And the thing that I love about Thurgood Marshall, and granted, I'm sporting my G right here. I had an event with RJ Gibbon this morning, and I know this is the NAACP. But the same way he talks about having his confirmation date, the date that MLK spoke very loudly on March 28th, the date that Barack Obama spoke loudly on August 28th, and the date that some of us are supporting, and him being the Democratic Democratic candidate for governor. See, those dates are just arbitrary because for me, Thurgood Marshall means something. And I was sworn in, I was elected on August 30th. And if you look at history, August 30th was the date that Thurgood Marshall was confirmed by the Senate as the first African American Supreme Court justice. So understanding that there are ways and things mean something. You know, I'm going to move a little bit away from Thurgood Marshall particularly, but I want to remind you of a quote that he said that is still alive today. He says, I wish I could say that racism are only distant memories. We must dissent from the indifference. We must dissent from the apathy. We must dissent from the fear, the hatred, and the mistrust. We must dissent because America can do better. Because America has no choice but to do better. See, when you talk about racism, it makes people uncomfortable. Yeah. But when we have to live it, no one cares about the discomfort that it creates. So we need to be able to talk about it in order to change the experience. And if you become dismissive about the concept of racism, then you have dismissed the very issues that can change this country. You have dismissed the history and the shoulders upon which people stand. I would say active racism is poison. Right? Those are the people who are actively doing it, calling 911 because a little girl selling lemonade, calling 911 because there's barbecues, making silly comments, having me taking a position that I believed in, that I thought was legally proper, sending a noose to my office saying a nigga will always just be a nigga. See, these are real experiences, and that's active racism. But when you talk about indifference to racism, that's a cancer. See, we have people, when you look at the Birmingham jail letter, the letter from the Birmingham jail that Martin Luther King wrote, he talked a lot about the indifference, and that's a cancer. And the apathy to racism is distraction. So we need to know either you're actively promoting racism, you're indifferent to racism, or you're fighting against it. Those are the only three positions. And I ask you, where do you stand? Where is it that you stand? I think that as we question ourselves and make ourselves accountable in the mirror, that's where the change is. I can look at you and say, oh, she didn't go to this event. Oh, they ain't believing in this. But the bottom line is the legacy I will leave. What will I say? And that's when we have to hold ourselves responsible. Now, talking here a little bit about the theme. And when I read about it, I was like, the theme for this luncheon is defeat hate, vote. And I've spoken at several Freedom Funds over the years, over the past year, and that's because I understand the value of the NAACP. A lot of people question it. They question the value of NAACP until what? They need the support. Right? That's the difference. So you have to understand the value and bring the value to the table before you need it personally. And when we think about defeating hate, I think that it's important that we understand voting does defeat hate, but we have to go deeper and explore how do we keep keeping on, generation after generation, in the face of injustice after injustice? How do you keep going? You see, our goal has to be to get out the vote. That's what we do. We make plans. Our goal must be to increase accountability and increase democracy, multiplying the hands in the pot. See, I enjoy cooking. My husband loves that, right? I enjoy Sunday dinners. I enjoy Thanksgiving. That's something that's a relaxation time for me, and I can cook too, right? So, but the bottom line is that I do enjoy cooking, and I still stand by the old school mamas who say, too many folks in the kitchen, you're going to mess up what I'm doing, right? You know, you got the big pot, too many hands in a pot. It's going to change what I have going on. It creates confusion and it becomes a distraction and can ultimately change the course to the meal that I plan. Well, I have news for everyone. This country is not a kitchen. And there's not one cook with a single menu. We are a democracy, and if you have to eat the meal, you have a right to influence what's on the menu. Right. See, this country is not Mama's kitchen. It's our home that was built on the backs and literally costed lives of people who look like us, who believe in what we believe in. And voting is undeniably where we have the power to change the very structures that perpetuate injustice. But we have to accept the truth that injustice is alive and well. And if a person is afraid to say, yes, racism exists, yes, injustice is real, we've already lost that conversation. If you cannot acknowledge its truth, we are not prepared and armed to make the change. So I want to talk about defeating hate and getting others out to how we stay the course. I want to talk about 3 points for you to take from here. How do we stay the course in the face of injustice? We have to know the how, the what, and the why. See, knowing how to focus is something so important. That's when we have the apathy of people not wanting to vote, people not wanting to show up, not take charge because they're too busy in their lives that we arise. You know, I have my thing to do. I've got my job to preserve. But at the end of the day, you need to know how to focus. And focus is something that comes from our core. See, we can talk about this with the NAACP, but the bottom line is also applies in your own individual lives. Adopting someone else's focus, their plan or agenda, will always have its limits. But when you know what you're focused on, it's that focus that you have and carry with you until your last breath. When you talk about how to focus, I always think of, and I know you will appreciate the good word that says, you focus by thinking on whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, just, whatsoever things are pure, lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. If there be any virtue, if there be anything, think on these things. That's how you stay focused. You need to know how to focus. And this doesn't mean that you deny the negativity. You ignore what's going on. I know what's going on, but I'm moving towards something. I know what's going on, but you can't stop me. I see you over there in my peripheral, but right now I'm focused on getting people out to vote. Right now I'm focused on justice. Right now I'm focused on eliminating racism. That is how you focus. You have to understand how to focus and not be distracted by misrepresentation, speculation, and what you may be going through and somebody telling you who you are, what your organization stands for, what you believe in, and how emotional you're being. No, I'm factual, and I'm letting you know that I'm focused on these facts and this truth, and I will not be distracted from anything that you have to say. See, the reality is we have to continue to know how to focus. Number 2, we need to know what we're focused on. See, a lot of times we say we're trying to just eliminate racism. We're trying to attack this. But no, focus is very specific. It's about a mission. It's about a purpose. When you know what you're focused on, you're not so easily distracted. If you think about the gentleman right now who doesn't know what I'm talking about, he's got a camera in his hand. And I'm up here, but he's focused over there. He knows exactly what he's focused on, and that's how we have to live our lives. You're zooming in on one particular issue, and you're focusing on what you're doing. It doesn't matter if there's another good option, another opportunity to take this. Right now, I'm focused here, and I'm not going to be deterred. When you look at weddings or events that have, multiple things going on, guess what? They have multiple cameras. They have multiple videographers because they want to try to catch every moment, and they know one person holding one camera can only capture one thing if they're truly focused. And that's how our vision has to be ultimately focused. You've got to understand that groups working together, I can't judge what angle you have if I'm so focused on what I'm doing. So when we're working together as an organization, worry about the camera and the focus that you have, and guess what? We get the picture. We get the perfect picture. It all blends together and we tell the story. Finally, you know how to focus. You know what to focus on. But the real question that keeps us sustained is understanding why we are focused on the injustice, why we are focused on eliminating racism, why we are focused on speaking truth to power. See, that why is something that you got to know the end game. You have to know, what am I really trying to do? Because there's a lot of people who are seeking positions so that they can increase their name, so that they can grow what they want to do. But the question is, when you're seeking that position, do you understand you're seeking responsibility? Do you understand that there's something that comes with that territory? Or do you just want the moment of fame because you think that it does something for you and you're ready to have your name written in lights? The bottom line, there's nothing glamorous about being responsible for serving the people. It is something you take hits, and while everyone is ready for you to sit, everyone is ready to take photographs and photo ops, behind that is some pain, there's some struggle, and the need for support to keep moving. So if you're not ready to take on all the responsibility, be careful about the position that you're trying to take. And that goes, generally speaking, it's in public service, it also goes in organizations, and it goes in your own home. If you're not ready to take the position, you need to make certain that you get ready for it. It doesn't mean you stay out of the game. It means you've got to go through the process and let yourself know and confirm that this is what I want to do. That's all about the why. The why you're doing something, it can never be about you. Because you have an end date. We all have a birthday and we all have an end date. And your why must be something that goes long past that. Your why has to be about other people. Your why has to be about a mission, about a purpose, about a little point in time that you were able to put your signature on that. See, a lot of times, you have to remember that true service is about doing what is right, what is just, and what's fair. That is what true service is about. And where people may disagree with you, and the hits that you take for doing what's right, the reality is those are their personal agreements. If you're truly focused on what you're focusing, you begin to expose other people. See, I learned a long time ago, and I'm so grateful for my mom and daddy who tell me, what people say about you says nothing about you, it tells you more about them. Yeah. So when you go through things, it's easy to just shake it off and dismiss it. It doesn't mean there aren't difficult days. What it means is that I get to the other side because I'm very clear on who's in the mirror and I know what's in my heart. So at the end of the day, you learn more about people when you're actually serving them. And I also learned another good word, that out of an abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So people don't mistakenly say things. They say exactly what they mean. Your why, what you're doing, has to be forward-thinking, perpetuating life, goodness, positive, and productive things. And we have to remember, attitudes are contagious. I remember standing on the stage speaking for my high school graduation in 1993. And that's what I said at my speech. At the tender age of 18, I said attitudes are contagious. And while I was thinking on a kid level, that stays with me today at 43. So we have to be mindful of the attitude we bring to the table. We have to be mindful that people will catch what we have, and we want to make certain that what we have is goodness, is justice, is not just the opposite. See, the reason I support certain people for governor is because I understand that there's something on that other side that is fighting. And I need somebody on this side fighting just as hard, just as strong, and progressively to understand that we have grown. I need somebody who will stand up not just for me, but for everybody. And that's ultimately what we're having. Because if you discriminate, guess what? You discriminate. So you can't just discriminate against a color, but say that you're going to be open to others. The bottom line, if you have a discriminatory nature in you, that is who you are. So I want to make certain that I have representing me someone who does not have that character, but understands that humanity and the treatment of that is the breakthrough that brings this state to where we need to be. Now I said my piece on that. Now, in closing, once you begin to understand why, the why, the what, the how we're focusing, ultimately now you're ready to defeat hate. Now you're ready to move on. Get people activated. But when you do that, we have to always remember taking on tough jobs means that we're going to be dealing with cancers, means that we're going to be around things that we have to be guarded. At the end of the day, knowing the environment that you're walking in. And in closing, I'm going to share with you the various things that as a prosecutor who fights crime, who fights inhumanity, who fights gun violence, who fights issues with due process, who wants to live in a safer community, I acknowledge that I'm fighting this. As the NAACP, as judges, as people who are fighting for justice, you understand you're walking into an arena with cancers, also known as monsters. I'm not talking about people because people aren't monsters. They may do monstrous things, but at the end of the day, you're walking into an arena of monsters. And I remember a saying that is in my office, and it says, whoever fights monsters should see to it in the process she does not become one herself. When I take my last breath, I believe in humanity, and I will make no decisions that ever challenge who I am. So we do it all by thinking on those things that are true,